Well, US Vice President Kamala Harris is visiting Vietnam as part of an effort to increase US engagement in the region, particularly with what America perceives as the threat of China's global and growing influence. Vietnam battling the biggest COVID-19 outbreak yet, with Hanoi under strict lockdown. Troops have been deployed to Ho Chi Minh City also to oversee restrictions and to distribute food. The trip is seen as an attempt to reaffirm US commitment to its allies in the area.
The threats we face are accelerating more rapidly. We have all felt this deeply, both as COVID-19 has taken millions of lives around the world, and as our world has come together to develop and distribute vaccines that are saving millions of lives.
Well, our Southeast Asia correspondent Jonathan Head has been listening to what she had to say.
The Biden administration is trying to claw back what it believes is lost US influence, lost over many years, but lost during the Trump administration, where President Trump focused mostly on China, paid very little attention to Southeast Asia. President Biden said he wants to reverse that. Vice President Harris's visit is an important part of that reshifting again back to this region. And in Vietnam, it did actually very well on COVID last year. It was almost a poster child for controlling it. All the countries in this region have been hit very hard by the Delta variant, and very few of them have been able to vaccinate large parts of their population. They're very short of vaccines. Vietnam, interestingly, shorter than most. And this is one area where the US can do very well, because China started vaccine diplomacy earlier in the year. In Vietnam, the population is actually quite anti-Chinese, and the government was quite reluctant to didn't take any vaccines from China, but all the countries that took large amounts from China are now very concerned about the effectiveness of those vaccines. So this push by the US to offer vaccines is an open goal for them. And indeed, Vice President Harris has offered partnerships in medical technology, pandemic preparedness. She opened the first branch of the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the US one, in Hanoi today in Vietnam. So she's capitalizing on that as much as possible, because after all, in the wake of what's going on in Afghanistan, it's quite hard for the US now to be presenting itself as you know, a really powerful ally to countries in this region. I think there'll be much more wait and see on that line.
Jonathan Head. Well, Michel Duclos is a former French ambassador and now a special advisor at the Institut Montaigne. He joins us now from Provence in France. Thank you for joining us on BBC World. I'm not sure how much you heard of Jonathan Head talking about the trust or the credibility factor that the United States now holds over the rest of the world. I just wondered what your view was about that in the light of Afghanistan. And of course, we were looking at Kamala Harris there in Vietnam, and people obviously think of the fall of Saigon.
Well, there are various opinions about that in France, of course. Some of us believe that it's not that important, that if you compare with Vietnam 75, for instance, the fall of Saigon didn't prevent the US to win the Cold War 15 years later. So maybe we are in that kind of a situation. For me, I don't buy that completely. I think that the credibility of the US has been damaged, and especially as your reporter was showing, in the Indo-Pacific region. Very simply, it's more credible now that the Chinese are tempted to attack Taiwan than a few weeks before. And the security guarantee of the US to the neighboring countries of China is less valuable today than a few weeks before.
OK, and if I may just turn to Afghanistan and the forever wars, as Joe Biden described them, something that the former British Prime Minister said was an imbecilic phrase to use. Do you think that President Biden is just as much America first as Donald Trump was?
Absolutely so. And it's very striking to see that the way he behaved with the European allies was not very different from the Trump's way. He didn't listen very much, he didn't consult very much, And as it was showed yesterday, it didn't take into account his European allies' concerns.
But was Joe Biden left with very little choice about what to do here? I mean, looking at the security implications, the Taliban had set that deadline, Donald Trump had agreed it, that would have opened up a whole Pandora's box, and the Taliban certainly got the best deal, it would seem, out of the peace talks. But the risk of dragging American troops and NATO troops into more conflict after 20 years was surely politically just hugely unpalatable.
Everybody understands that, but it was a matter of a few days more, maybe 1 week or two. It's something, a risk that should have been taken.
Okay, and just looking at the last readout in Afghanistan for the Afghan National Army commandos, the son of the former warlord in Panjshir, what do you think the world will and indeed should do if, as it is now, it is encircled and those forces are massacred?
I think that, unfortunately for us, those who do have some influence on Kabul now, on the Taliban, are first of all the Pakistanis, then the Russians and the Chinese. So it's not completely impossible. We have to try to do that, of course, to have in place a kind of a task force with some of the permanent members of the, well, all of the permanent members of the Security Council, plus Pakistan, and try to have a moderating influence, to have some kind of political mediation between the Panjshir leadership and the Taliban. That's something we could try to achieve in the next days.
All right, okay. Michel Duclos, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on BBC World News.